Hi, and welcome back to Call to the Home. Today, we're going to be concluding our series on budgeting, and I'm going to warn you a teensy bit here at the outset. I almost skipped this episode and went ahead to the next series, but I thank God for putting the right things, people, and verses in my path this week to encourage me that this is something that does need to be said to modern women. And I do want to do one fence building, and I promised I wouldn't edge case, but some of the things I'm going to say are things that are going to be hindsight is 2020 for you. So please don't take any of this to mean that you're justified to live in discontentment if you already chose yourself a harder path of debt and it's not easy or possible for you to get out of that right now. However, don't make that an excuse to not make any maybe drastic changes to move forward and get out of that position. So, my primary hope with today's episode is to, of course, give everyone some tips, but my focus is for those that are young and just starting out, what is the right expectation and mentality to have towards what modern society tells us are necessary expenses but aren't listed as necessary in the Word of God. So, we need to be very careful about and work very hard to pick out all of the lies that Satan and the world and our flesh have kind of put in there that our society says are good and necessary that really aren't. And so my hope again is that those of you that are young and just starting out are able to start on a better foundation, have more modest expectations, and not put yourself in the path of debt in the first place. If you're already there, it's very hard to dig yourself out. And you are possibly going to have to take quite drastic measures, and you may never get out. It's okay. What's not okay is for you to use that to justify discontent or to then spend all of your hours, mental anxiety, all of your dollars towards getting out of debt that realistically is not happening in your lifetime. As the scriptures say, if you can be free, be free. But if you can't and you are a bondservant, you have by choices or perhaps by circumstances medically have put in the path of debt in your life, then just live in that path. Be joyful and serve the Lord and don't waste all of your energies and efforts and mental health on trying to get out of something that is just not going to be your lot in life. But train your children to do differently. So I have a couple of things to talk through today. I have 5 on my list, and it's the last one that is going to be the most controversial because what I'm going to say flies in the face of what the United States average American has been indoctrinated by communism and socialism to believe that they are owed, that they must have. And I'm going to slap that in the face and tell you that's wrong. You don't need that. It's actually not biblical even to have it in the first place. So let's start with less controversial things and work our way there. Item number 1, purchasing a home. It is way out of hand in the United States today and has been for decades. So, contrary to modern popular advice, and contrary even to Dave Ramsey advice, what is reasonable for your amount of money you can afford, forget what you think you need, that you can afford on a home, multiply your husband's yearly pay by 1.25. I know we're going to do a little bit more math today, so I'll show you how that works out. Multiply by 1.25. That's what you can afford, period. Do not buy something bigger than that. Oops. What if you already did? What if you already bought triple what he can make in a year? What if you bought 5 times? You way overbought a house. Right now, the housing market's not great. But look, it may be possible to sell and downgrade to something that is within that range. Now, here's what happens, and I'm going to do some math to kind of show you so that hopefully you see the wisdom in making that drastic change. Ideally, you start out young and you start out in a small home and you work your way up. When you can't afford to pay for the house that you are in, every year, every payment, you are paying interest to the bank to thank them for letting you live in a house that you don't even own yet. The bank bought the house for you and you're paying them rent to live in the house. Only when you have finished paying for the house does the ownership transfer to you. It's not even your house, which means you have to have high levels of property insurance on it and a whole bunch of extra costs are accrued. on top of you paying interest for living in a house that actually isn't yours. The longer you go paying on your house, the more and more money you pay. If you take out a 20-year mortgage, you're actually sometimes paying double what your house is worth. 30-year mortgage, sometimes, depending on the loan percentage, triple what your house is worth. That is not biblical. That is not godly wisdom. That is you living outside your means, American dream, in a place where perhaps the homes are oversized, too expensive, cost of living is ridiculous. Like I always say, New York and California, prime examples. You're not going to find a place in the big city that's going to be affordable for a family. Move out farther, commute farther. It's actually cheaper. So again, let's look at some math. What does that mean? 1.25 times my income. How do I figure out what sort of home I can afford? So here we are connected to the drawing screen, and we're just going to start with an average number, and then I'm going to address the what if I'm higher, what if I'm lower, because I don't want you, again, to be able to have that as an excuse. Let's say that his take-home pay is $75,000 a year. This is after taxes. This is what actually comes home to you. What does multiply by 1.25 mean? Literally on the calculator, type in his pay, multiply by 1.25, and let's write down the number. So if after taxes your take-home pay is this much, then the most home you can afford is a $93,750 home. That's it. That's what you can afford. That's the size home you're looking at buying. And before you tell me that's crazy, that's not possible, I'm going to look at you and I'm going to say, actually, yes, it is. So don't tell me that it isn't. You may have to move farther out, more into the country, more into a rural area, but you can still find homes that are that cheap. And so that's step one. Okay, what if he makes more than that? Well, then you can make more, earn more. You're going to be able to afford a bigger house. This is kind of a higher salary, even by modern American standards, but the same rule applies. Let's say he makes 125, that's his take home after paying taxes and Social Security and Medicaid and all the things the government takes out of our paycheck, then your home that you're looking at hoarding is $156,250, and that's what you can afford. And so unless you have saved up more cash than that, that's your home price. That's your mortgage right there. Now, of course, if you save up more money than that, then you can afford a bigger home. By saving, you've been able to do that. Or perhaps by investing your money, you've been able to increase it and grow it, and you have more money to put on a house. Great, do that. But if you're going just based off of your husband's salary alone, this is how it works. Now, what if he doesn't earn that much? How do you do this? You still can. So let's say this is where you live. What can you afford for this? Calculator, $50,000 loan on a home. That's it. That's what you can afford. And again, anything that you're able to save above that number, great, add that to that. And then you can go higher than that number. But that's how you figure this out. Stop playing the game with these higher percentages that the world wants to tell you because they want you to be in debt for ages and ages and ages. So let's just look at what happens if on this low salary, which is actually the norm for a decent bit of the United States, what happens if I instead go out and get what the US calls a modest home for $120,000 on a 20-year mortgage? And I'm going to way simplify this. Technically, you have to look at compound interest, compounded continually or compounded daily, and that's a little more math than is absolutely necessary. Let's say you get a good 6% interest rate. A very simple way to kind of figure out what's happening here is it's 6% of the home price I'm paying to the bank every single year. Now, again, that's a simplification, but that means every year I am paying $7,200 to the bank. That is in addition to my payments that I'm making towards paying off that debt. So for 20 years of payments, you are paying the bank $144,000 and paying for the house $120,000. So because you, for whatever reason, decided to buy a home way bigger than it was actually what you could afford, You ended up paying this plus this. So you paid a grand total of $264,000 for a $120,000 house. That's why you can't do that. You will never pay off that house. Imagine what you could have done with that extra $144,000 over the course of those 20 years. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. So these 20-year mortgages, this is actually not good. This is not the norm. You should pay off your house, I would say, as quickly as possible, but in under 5 years. And that is why we are looking at this reasonable 1.25 times your income number. And so if I can pay off my house in under 5 years at 6% interest, if I had bought too expensive of a house, of course, I can't make the payments. I couldn't do it. But that drastically decreases the amount of money that I'm giving to the bank and then I can't use. So let's say I chose what I would actually could afford, $50,000 on a 5-year mortgage, and we're still at 6%. Each year, I'm spending $3,000 in just interest. So that at the end of the 5 years, I have spent an extra $15,000 to the bank because I bought a house more expensive than I can afford. You see how this works? So if I had bought a house cheaper or saved money first and then, got a house when I could get my loan smaller than this, then I would be able to not spend or waste all of my money on interest. If I can pay it off in 1 year, I only lose $3,000. If it takes me 5 years, I lose $15,000. That's way better than the $144,000 that I lost in my 20-year mortgage. So again, the reason why you want to shoot for a much smaller home is because otherwise you lose tons of money, double or triple what your house is actually worth in interest. And scripture teaches us that debt is unwise. And if we literally are not in the position where we will die if we don't do ABC, then that's not a debt that we had to do. Say what you want to, you chose that debt. So yes, you can find a home that is that inexpensive. So let me next address all of the questions that pop up and the common complaints and arguments that I hear about this. So number one is people will say, I have to have this many bathrooms because I have this many people in my house. Or I have to have this many square feet or this many bedrooms because of this many people in my family. You actually don't. So I want you to be grounded in historical and biblical norms. Typically, people lived in one-room or two-room houses, and in fact, most of the world outside of the Western culture still lives in one-room or two-room houses today. Single story, very minimal amenities, a lot of them not much in the way of heating and air and electricity and heated water and all of these extras that we have. Now, some of those things, right, are good and useful to have, but the norm historically for a huge family, mom and dad and 10 kids, was a 500 square foot home. For the last 6,000 years, that's how people have lived. And in most of the world today, that's still how people live. So you can't tell me that you can't raise your family of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in less than the 2,400 square foot mansion that your city tells you or country tells you should buy, or even less than the 1,800 square foot house that's the standard suburban house in your area. Go get a mobile home. Live in a trailer park. It's not going to kill you. If that's what you can afford, that's what you can afford. Now, again, for those first starting out, how does this work? Well, you won't stay there forever because once you've paid off your home, guess what? You're not making any home payments. So save that same amount of money that you were paying on your home each month. And very quickly, you'll have money saved up to pay cash for the next one, or take the same size loan out and get a bigger house. You upgrade. You should not, first starting out, first buying a home, be buying the home that you're going to live in with your grandkids. You should be buying a starter home, something small. So the wise way to do this is when you first get married, you get the teeniest, tiniest little mobile home. Stop the rental stuff. Get out of the cities. That's not how God designed us to live and be. You're not getting anything for your money. You're just throwing it away if that's what you're doing. Get a teeny tiny little mobile home that's actually yours. Property is actually yours. Pay for it, get it totally paid off, and then start saving that money, that $5, 6, 7, $800 a month towards buying a real house. And then upgrade to something small, something that's, 1,000 square feet. Pay that one off. And then maybe as your kids are hitting, their early teen years, then you can upgrade that to something a little bigger, maybe a 1,600 square foot or an 1,800 square foot. And because you're paying it off, saving for a couple years, then upgrade, pay it off, save for a couple of years, upgrade. You're not wasting hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest payments on loans that you shouldn't have taken out in the first place. I know, I told you, a little bit controversial. Item number 2, cars. Okay, so same thing, you're gonna already guess where this is going. Same thing applies here when we're talking about cars. So wisdom says don't take a loan out for a car, period. Again, best thing to do is starting out as a teenager, save up money for a very, very, very cheap used car. Or see maybe if a relative's got a car that's really old, they're upgrading and they'll sell it to you for, a low price or even give it to you perhaps. Grandpa's old car, Uncle Jerry's super old car, right? That's a good way to go. Save that money. Quit spending it on phone subscriptions and all of these things that teenagers waste their money on. As a 16-year-old, you should be working and you should be earning money and you should be saving up money for these things. Pay cash, get it used, super old. As you've paid it off, again, same principle, right? Look at this. It's going to come back over and over again. The way of life is that we save up and then we purchase. We save up and wait, and then we purchase. So that then by the time you are in that position, you're married, you've got it, your family is just now starting together, you can afford to pay cash for a decent car that's used. Stop buying new cars. Get a used one. But unfortunately, inflation happens and even good brand used cars today are quite expensive. So go for something that's reliable, but you can't justify starting out and buying your forever car, just like you can't justify starting out and buying your forever house. So look at what you can afford to save up for. What can you afford to pay off again in a 1 to 2 year period? Shouldn't be having 5 year loans on cars. Pay that thing off very quickly. Now, the other thing I'm going to say about families and cars and wives, this is something that even if you've already passed that point, we need to have a little bit more wisdom on. You don't need 2 cars. We didn't have 2 cars for a very, very long time in our marriage. Very long time. You can survive on 1 car. So guess what that means? When he's at work, you don't have the car. That, or y'all get up and you drop him off at work so that you have the car that day. And then you go pick him up. That's actually the norm, right? Even think back to the Little House on the Prairie days. They had 1 wagon for the family. Or sometimes they didn't have a wagon. They walked and they went and borrowed one from the neighbor who had saved up and had one. So if dad was using the wagon, you either went along with him and stayed in town for the day and did your shopping and visited with someone and then came home with him, or you just didn't go. That was the way that it worked. So this, again, modern idea of wealth in America that we have to have 2 cars and every teenager's got to have a car, that's ridiculous and not normal. That is wealthy person living. And if you get there, be thankful for that. That's great if your cars are paid off. But if they're not paid off, you might consider approaching your husband and seeing if, especially if it was you that was the one begging for the second car, if he would maybe consider selling the car that doesn't fit everybody in it and using that money to start paying off more quickly the car that fits everybody. Obviously, you got to have a car that everybody fits in. And so that is the way to go. 1 car until you've paid it off. You shouldn't have 2 car payments. 1 car payment, that's probably reasonable, but pay it off quickly. So you're going to have to go in a, hey, we're in debt budget. You can't be spending a lot of money on all these extras and things that we talked about in the last episode. If you're in debt, the debts should be paid off quickly because the longer you wait, the more you're paying somebody else just because they bought it for you, technically. And then that money's wasted and useless. So don't do that. All right, item number 3, college and student loans. This one is going to be short and sweet. If you can't afford to pay for it in cash, you don't go. I said it. As someone who actually took out a loan for my part of my second degree and all of my third degree and still has to pay that one, don't do it. If you don't have the money, I'm going to tell you right now, there's your sign from God that you aren't supposed to go. If you have the money, go. That's fine. Great. But as soon as the money runs out, stop. You're done. Work, save up the money, and then you can go back again. That's how it is. Women, we don't usually need college degrees. I cannot think in my head at all for any reason why a woman needs a college degree right now. It's not a sin to get them. So if you can afford them and you have the money, go ahead and enjoy the things that you can learn there perhaps, but you don't need it. So that's just something you have to consider, with your husband together. Is that something of eternal value? Is that going to add to your family? Is that something you can use to bless your children, grandchildren, and community with knowing that information? Or can you get it a different way? For thousands of years, people have learned from other people and from books, and those are either cheap or free. So I consider that you should probably look at those options first. Now, for a man, he needs an occupation so he can provide for his family. But again, you have to be very careful, super common, especially with doctors, that when you look at the totality of all of your training until you start actually working, you're all done with your school and you've got your certificates and all of that lined up. How much debt did you go into and what's your first year's salary? Multiply by 1.25. If your debt is greater than that number, then you can't do that. That's dumb. So many even doctors today are in insane amounts of debt and therefore charge that to their patients, which is why one of the reasons why healthcare costs are so expensive. Now the government wrecked it up royally, but that's one of the reasons. And so as you train your children and help guide them into occupations, your sons into occupations and your daughters into things they can do from home as wives and mothers, you need to very carefully consider that while the ancient tradition has been, doctors and lawyers make the most money, they have the greatest amount of debt, and they may not be making enough money to justify that. So you need to do some good math, sit down and calculate all of this out. And if that is a goal that they go to college, A, what can they afford? B, are they actually working right now to save up towards that? And then C, what happens in the middle of it if they suddenly can't afford it? Just because you're halfway through doesn't mean you can't quit. There's no shame in that. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. Bow out before you put yourself in debt. Because once you have the debt, it is so hard to get out from underneath it. So hard. So I encourage you, steer your children away from taking debt at all in the first place. All right, item number 4, utilities. Again, this is something that most of history we didn't have to worry about because it wasn't even an option. You didn't have heat, you didn't have air, you didn't have hot water heaters, you didn't have water that came to the house through pipes, you didn't have gas that came in and piped in so that you could cook with and all of that. So they didn't have it. It was gone and they survived. And guess what? They did great. It's not a sin to have these things, but I would encourage you to look at ways that you can save a lot of money each month in these areas by pushing yourselves a little bit to kind of get out of your comfort zone. So just as an example, in the winter, you don't have to have your heat set to 74. Unless there is a medical reason that you cannot get around, wear more clothes and then just keep it set to a more moderate number. If you normally keep it set to 70, try 69. You'd be amazed how much money you save just in 1 degree difference. Heating your house is really expensive. Likewise in the summer with air conditioning. You don't need to have your house at 72 degrees in the middle of summer, especially if it's 120 outside. Used to live in Arizona, been there. The air conditioning actually can't get it that cold anyways. So push yourselves. If you're used to setting it at 72, try 74, try 76, try 78. You won't die. If people can live in the literal middle of the desert with no air conditioning, I think you're going to be okay in 78 degrees. Again, you save a ton of money. You also want to check some things around your house, just general upkeep. As the keepers of our home, we should be mindful of these things. Do you have a cracked window? Do you have a window with a faulty seal? Maybe a door with a faulty seal, drafty fireplace and things. There are simple, inexpensive things you can do, rolling up towels to put in door cracks, taping. Walmart even sells a whole section of like ways to weatherproof your home a little better in the winter. Taping up the window cracks, taping up the door jambs, putting better weather stripping in there helps keep the warm and, climate controlled air in your home and the either too hot or too cold air you don't want out of your home. So you don't want to be wasting money. If you are spending money to heat your home, you want to keep the heat in. And likewise in the summer, if you're spending money to cool your home, you want to keep the cool in. So look at things you can do, just inexpensive things to make sure that your home is better weatherproofed. And that is something that you can do as mom and wife. Water is another huge area that we overspend in because we take for granted I can turn on faucets and turn on showers and we've got water and it's just free. It's not free. Look at your water bill very carefully. Here where I live in Georgia, you pay based on how much you use. And the price changes once you cross over thresholds. So the first 20,000 gallons you use is this price. The next 10,000 gallons is more, and the next 10,000 gallons is more, and the next is more. And so you have to look very carefully, what bracket are you falling into? Can you make some simple changes to knock yourself down into a smaller bracket? And a lot of these is just a repeated advice that I've already given in the previous episodes and seasons. So things like don't run the washing machine if all I have is 5 items in there. Wait until I have enough things that I can fill it to its max level because it's more water efficient when it's full. Dishwasher, apply the same advice. Kids don't need to wash every day. In fact, it's actually horrible for their skin. It dries them out, it breaks their hair, it's terrible. So little kids, under 10, they don't need a daily bath. That's a lot of water. So quit that. Once a week is plenty for a little one. Now, obviously, if they're outside in the mud, they've got to wash up, but they don't need to have the bath water, all the way up this high. Low amount of bath water. Use the least that you need so that you can actually get the job done. Likewise, we don't need to stand in the lovely warm shower in the middle of winter for 30 minutes. That's ridiculous. In and out of there, 10 minutes tops. If you can beat that, that's even better. So be quick. Make sure that your water usage is justified. You genuinely need it to get clean, not just because it's comfortable. And get out of there because otherwise you're wasting a ton of water. Be mindful with little things. They've been telling us for years in school and on the commercials in the United States. Things like when you're brushing your teeth, are you leaving the water running while your toothbrush is in your mouth? Why? You're not using it. That's wasteful. A Christian doesn't do that. We are mindful of what we're using of God's resources, not because some crazy we got to save the planet thing, but because we know this is a resource God has given to us and we are paying for it. So not only am I wasting water, I'm wasting money, which I now can't use to do things that God has commanded me to do, hospitality, paying for, the pastor's salaries at church and these things that God has commanded us to use the money for. I can't do it because I'm wasting the money. Likewise, washing your hands. Wash your hands well, but don't leave the water on too long. If I'm washing dishes, the water better not be running while I'm hand washing dishes. And in fact, your dishwasher is more water efficient than hand washing. So if it can safely go in the dishwasher, do that. Stop hand washing things and using 3 times as much water as what your dishwasher can effectively clean with a third of that amount of water. So be wise. There are ways that you can save on water. The kids don't need a sprinkler in the backyard. They don't need pools and splash pads. It's really expensive. We priced this last year. It costs us $30 every time we let the kids play in the pool or the splash pad in the backyard. And we just have, a little blow up one and you put a hose up to it and play with it. It's $30 every time. Budget for that and plan for that. Because very quickly, if you do it every day for a month, that's $30 times 30 times. That's $900. $1,000 you just dropped this month so the kids can play in the pool every day. Can you afford that? If not, then you can't do that. So don't even set that up as an expectation. There's plenty of fun things they can do outside that don't cost that amount of money. All right, last thing, electricity. If it is plugged in, it is drawing electricity, even if it is off. Now, some things you can't unplug safely. So don't go unplug your refrigerator. Don't go unplug your oven every time after you're done using it. That's nuts. But look around your home. Are there things that you aren't using that stay plugged in? And some of this may sound crazy to you, and you may be like, well, that's inconvenient. Okay. So get over it and do it anyways. Air fryers on the tag actually say not to leave them plugged in. Go look this up. I'm not making it up. Because they can actually catch on fire and burn your house down. They're not meant to stay plugged in. The appliance makers assume you know and have read the book that says to unplug it after use and don't plug it in until you're about to use it. Toasters, air fryers, coffee pots, all of these things are not supposed to be plugged in until you're using them and are supposed to be unplugged when you're not. So those kind of things that are not built-in appliances to your home, you need to unplug them when you're not using them. You may want to consider if you don't need as many electronics, period. The more things you plug in, the more money you spend on electricity. Now, a little more math than I'm intending to go into in this platform, but if you know me in real life and want to talk about it, I'd be happy to sit down with you and show you. You can calculate how much money your item is costing you in electricity. Every electronic in the United States has a tag on it or a label on it, or in the manual tells you how many volts it draws, how many amps it draws, how many kilowatt hours, all of those things is all listed on these items. You just have to know one or two physics equations. You can look them up online, nothing more than just multiplying and dividing. Words. Nothing more complicated than just multiplying and dividing in a calculator. You don't have to know calculus. But you can take that with your electric bill and you can calculate exactly to the penny how much it costs you to use a lamp for a month and whether that's the one for you. When you go shopping, ladies, for things that you genuinely need in your home, don't just compare the price of the item. Look at the price that it's going to cost you in electricity to run the item. For example, if I'm looking between two toasters and this one's $10 cheaper than that one, that doesn't mean it's the better deal. Because if the cheaper toaster uses more energy to do the same job, I am going to spend hundreds of dollars more in the long run on the cheaper toaster because it draws more electricity when it's plugged in. And I'm going to be using it regularly, or I shouldn't be buying it. So sometimes the more expensive upfront cost is better because in the long run, I'm saving money. So we need to go to that level. There's tons of YouTube tutorials out there that will help you calculate those kinds of things. And if there's an interest and enough people let me know, I'll maybe throw together a mini video that walks through that. But those are the kinds of things we need to be thinking as we're making purchases for our homes and we're considering how to save money. Utilities costs are variable because you pay based on how much you use. So be wise that you really and truly need to use what you're using it for. All right, last one, and this is a controversial one. And I don't want to go too much longer on the time, so we'll just keep it short and sweet. Number 5, insurance. Okay. Insurance is a scam, and it is not something God commanded us to do. You are basically gambling with your money. And I know you can disagree with me, that's all right, but I told you it'd be controversial, so I warned you. You're gambling with your money. You're gambling that you're going to have a problem and you're going to not pay it because your insurance company is going to pay it. And your insurance company is gambling that you're not going to have any problems, so they're taking your money and they aren't going to ever have to do anything with it. So this is a two-way gamble, and guess what? You, the individual buying the insurance, usually lose. You usually lose. Rather than what God prescribes, that you save up money so that you can take care of problems that might arise in the future and you trust God to provide and you tighten your budget so that you can take care of what comes. You pay someone else so that they take care of you in the future and you lose tons of money from your regular budget. Okay, so that is a biblical understanding of insurance. However, we have this issue, especially in the United States and perhaps others too, where you are required by law to carry some kinds of insurance. Now, first, we need to be very well versed in what the law actually requires because many people fall for paying for these very expensive kinds of insurance because they think, well, I have to have it, I have no choice, when that's actually far more than what the law required. So, for instance, car insurance. In some states, you don't have to have car insurance. It's not foolish to not get it if you're saving up money so that if you do cause an accident, you can pay rightfully for the person whose car you damaged or whose body you damaged in the crash. So biblically, you save up money so that you can take care of those situations. If your state requires car insurance, you need to submit and you need to get car insurance. But most states only require you to have insurance to cover the other person's car in the case of a crash. And I would bet that if you look at your car insurance, you have a lot more than that covered. Now, again, backpedaling to what we were talking about at the beginning about cars and buying them. If you have a loan out on a car, you don't own the car. The loan company owns the car, and they're going to require you have a high level of insurance on that car because they own it, not you. And they want to make sure if you weren't wise and you crashed that thing, that they get their money back because they are the ones that own that car. It's not yours. Reason number 542, why you shouldn't take out a loan. Okay. Obviously, it happens. It's not the end of the world, but we need to get out of that mindset as a people. So if you have to have it, check that you only have what you need and that you are, in fact, saving money, putting it aside in an untouchable place where, you're not going to accidentally spend it on something that is saved up for those kinds of events. Homeowners insurance. Likewise, it's not supposed to be that some third-party corporation rushes in to help you if, there's a fire in the house or a tree falls on the house. That's just things that in history it happened. And then you saved up the money and you fixed it and you took care of that. That's normal. It's not normal to pay in this weird gambling situation that someone else takes care of that for you. But if you don't own your home, you don't have a choice. You don't own the home. So you have to pay for whatever insurance the actual owner of the home, probably your bank, tells you that you have to get. But once you've paid it off, look at your options. If you can save up money and don't carry insurance on it at all. I know, that's crazy. How can I say that in this modern American world? I did. So you don't need it. It doesn't mean it's wrong. You might find something that's very minimal coverage that's a reasonable amount and you can handle sending that money off into the abyss every year and that someone else gets to decide what's done with that. I would encourage you not to do that, but that's okay if that's what you want to do. Likewise, for all the other kinds of insurance, dental insurance. Okay, for this one, there's a couple ways you can go. Exercise wisdom, right? You shouldn't have to carry dental insurance. You can pay cash. And in fact, they charge you less when you're self-pay than they charge for someone who has insurance. We had no dental insurance for most of our marriage. The last 2 or 3 years, we did go ahead and get it because some of the children had a couple dental issues that required some pretty significant fillings, and one of them was very, very anxious about it, and so required some extra measures that they used to calm them down that, wouldn't normally have been a cost. So we did end up getting it. So here's the math you want to do if you have to see, is it worth it? Take the amount of money that you would spend in your monthly premiums for the year, total that up. And then add to that all of your copays for every time you go in for a dental cleaning, every time you have an x-ray, what are they going to charge you? And then figure in on average, so far for your family, how many cavities are getting filled every year? What do they charge you for that? There's your sum of money. Ask your dentist, hey, what's the self-pay price for a cleaning and an exam and a cavity filling? And then compare. In some cases, it's cheaper to just pay out of pocket. And for us, for most of our lives, that's truth. We paid out of pocket and it was way cheaper. We spent maybe $300 a year for the whole family every year to take care of everything. Maybe 300. Now, not so much. Hopefully, we can get the kids' cavities in check and take care of that. But you have to look at it like that. So, vision, same thing, right? If you or someone in the family wears contacts or glasses, aka, I'm going to encourage you, why are you wearing contacts? You're paying every month for the rest of your life for them to send you new ones. You may not like it, but glasses you pay one time and they're good for 3 years. You could maybe get 5 years out of it if your eyes don't change that much. So consider, right? You have to look at cost per month multiplied out for 3 years versus a pair of glasses for the same 3 years, one pair of glasses for the same 3 years. What's cheaper? It may be cost effective to do the contacts. Go for that. No problem if it is. But if it's not, you're spending extra money just because you don't like how you look in glasses. You might need a little bit of a humility check, reality check there that it doesn't matter that much how you look. The other thing you want to consider is it's not always cheaper to have vision insurance. So again, calculate it out. What am I paying every month for 12 months? In my case, I calculated out for 3 years worth because I only go every 3 years. The last time I went and had my eyes checked, one didn't change and one only changed by 0.25. I'm not getting a new prescription for that. So every 3 years, I calculate 3 years worth of insurance premiums. What's my copay to go in for that exam on year 3? And what am I still paying for my glasses and lenses on that 3rd year? Total that all up. Whereas if I don't go to the eye doctor year 1, $0. Don't go to the eye doctor year 2, $0. Year 3, what does it pay? Self-pay cash to pay the eye doctor for the exam. It's like $50 here. And then if I buy very modest, inexpensive frames and the most inexpensive lenses that can handle my prescription, I'm kind of blind, so I have to get the high index lenses, but I don't have to get the fancy ones, just the regular ones. What does that cost me out of pocket? And so far, every single year, even though two of us, no, three of us in the family are on wearing glasses, it is not cheaper to get eye insurance. It is way cheaper to pay out of pocket. So that's what we do. So again, you have to look at what's wise with budgeting. You have to actually do math. You can't just assume that, oh, it's good to have insurance. Stop. Okay, and the last sacred cow I'm going to talk about today is health insurance. Unless you have a lifelong debilitating chronic illness, you don't need health insurance. It is not a biblical mandate. Okay, so we didn't have health insurance for a good bit of our marriage. We still don't actually have health insurance now. And we just can't afford it. The US government, and especially in the last decade, has totally so destroyed the medical industry and the way that things run. The insurance companies currently decide what the doctors do and don't do, not the doctors. The insurance companies decide what the doctors can charge for each procedure, not the doctors. So it no longer has anything to do with what it actually costs or what the doctor's time is actually worth. It's now all about what the insurance company is willing to pay. And the doctors either take that or decline that particular insurance. It's horrible. You used to be able to pay $150 a month and have an entire family supported on health insurance, and that wasn't that unreasonable. Now it's $1,000 a month for the exact same coverage. Go look it up. Wayback Machine will still give you the numbers. So in 10 years, we've gone 10 times more expensive. It's not cost effective anymore unless you fall under that you have a chronic, debilitating, lifelong illness that requires consistent medical care. In that case, it may be cheaper, but price it out. Doctors all accept cash. All of them do. Hospitals all accept cash. They also have income contingent payment plans. So if you go in to have a baby on insurance, here where I live, they charge you $35,000, and that's not a C-section. That is, I went in, I naturally delivered my baby with no epidural. I stayed overnight and left the moment I hit the 24-hour mark, which is the state's legal requirement where I am for natural birth. And I went home, and that was the end. $35,000 is what they bill insurance. But if you tell them I'm self-pay, I don't have insurance, guess what the bill was? $3,000. Tell me how that makes sense. So look at what you actually use the doctor for and need the doctor for in any given year. Stop playing this, well, what if something happens? That's what you're supposed to save money for. And at the end of the day, trust God for that. But I just leave you with those things again, ideally targeted towards those younger families just starting out, young ladies, teenagers. What are we thinking about? What's reasonable? What's normal as an expectation? When you get married and you tell your husband, oh, do we need this? Do we need this? Don't tell him we need this. Because you can, as a wife, put a lot of pressure on your husband and make him purchase things for you or get him anxious about needing things for you that God doesn't require us to have. So if you're the one that pushed for something and now you're realizing, oh man, that was wrong, you might need to humbly go back to him and say, hey, I am so sorry I pushed us to get this. I've been rethinking this and I'm hearing and reading some things and we actually shouldn't have done that. What would you feel, how would you feel about us backtracking off of this, getting out of this debt, getting rid of this thing? And so maybe that conversation needs to be had. Sometimes those decisions can't be walked back. So it is what it is. Moving forward, do the best you can. But a lot of the debts that we take on in this country and day and age, we add on to ourselves. They're not things that we actually genuinely need. And so we put ourselves in debt slavery and then we cry that we can't live on one income or we can't raise our family when we did that to ourselves. So if we live much more simply and much more the way God designed us to live, which you can still do in this day and age, though yes, our government does make it harder with the taxation and the ways they've interfered in businesses and insurance and all of that, it still can be done. So don't let that be an excuse to you to run away from these debts that you could eliminate, to not try and save money in these areas that we are told from every avenue we must have. This is basic necessities the basic things of life. It's not actually basic. And so that will conclude our budgeting series and start something new next week. Until then,